The sky above Valkuran burned like a dying forge. Crimson clouds rolled across the horizon, dragging with them the smell of metal and ozone. Beneath that rust-colored expanse, the city crouched in silence, its towers and bridges warped into silhouettes against the light of the failing sun. The air trembled with the faint hum of the planetary shield generator, an ancient system that still strained to hold back the storms unleashed by centuries of mining and war. Talon Marek stood at the edge of the observation deck, 1,000 meters above the lower levels, his eyes fixed on the molten sky. He was tall and lean, his face carved by years of hard labor and harder decisions. A thin scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, a memory of the first war between the colonies and the Arkan Confederation. The hum of the generators echoed faintly through his boots, a sound that once gave him comfort, but now only reminded him of decay. Behind him, the heavy door slid open with a hiss of decompression. A woman's voice followed, measured and calm. "You always watch the storms when you're thinking," she said. He turned slightly. Myra Callan stood there, wrapped in a grey flight coat that reached her knees. Her hair was the color of burnished copper, tied back in a loose braid that swung when she walked. Her eyes, sharp, calculating, carried the same fire that had made her one of the youngest fleet commanders in the Outer Ring before the war ended. "I watch them because they remind me what we've done," Talon said, turning back toward the view. "Valkuran was once green, oceans, forests, everything. Now it's a forge world choking on its own breath." Mira stepped beside him, resting her gloved hands on the railing. "You didn't cause this. Didn't stop it either," he said quietly. Below, the city pulsed with life. Massive industrial towers belched steam into the air, their surfaces crawling with workers and drones. Transport skiffs darted between platforms, carrying ore from the mines that riddled the planet's crust. Everything ran on borrowed time, machines older than the people who maintained them, systems patched and repatched since before either of them were born. Myra's gaze shifted to the horizon. "The Arkan fleet is moving again." Talon's expression hardened. "How many ships?" "Enough to make the Council nervous." Long-range scans picked up at least 9 carriers crossing the Veil line. No direct engagement yet, but they're probing our outer systems. "They're testing us," Talon said, "seeing if humanity still has the will to fight." She nodded. "And what do you think?" He didn't answer immediately. The question hung between them like static. "I think we never lost the will," he said finally. "Just the unity." Mira turned to face him fully. "The Council wants you to speak at the summit. They're calling it the Renewal Pact, an attempt to unify the remaining colonies before the Arkan decide we're too weak to stand." Talon's laugh was dry. "The last time I spoke to the Council, I told them the Outer Ring would burn if they kept exploiting the frontier worlds. They laughed at me. 2 years later, the frontier fell." "Maybe they've learned," she said. He looked at her sharply. "You don't believe that?" "No," she admitted, "but I believe they're desperate, and desperate people can be made to listen." The observation deck trembled as another storm wave struck the shield dome. A dull red glow filled the sky, turning Myra's features into molten shadow. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Talon said, "If I go to this summit, it won't be to beg for unity. It'll be to warn them. The Arkan won't stop with probing fleets. They're building toward something larger, something worse." Mira's brow furrowed. "You've seen proof." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small data crystal, its surface flickering faintly. "Intercepted transmissions from the Vega line. The Arkan are mobilizing slave fleets again. Reclaimers." The word hung like a curse. Everyone in the colonies knew the stories. The Reclaimers were not an army, they were harvesters. They swept across worlds, capturing entire populations and repurposing them as forced labor to fuel the Confederation's endless expansion. The thought of them returning was enough to drain the color from Myra's face. "You're sure?" she asked. "I saw the footage," Talon said. "Worlds stripped bare, cities turned to bone and glass. If the Reclaimers cross into human space again, there won't be a second war, there'll be extinction." Mira exhaled slowly. "Then we can't afford to wait." He gave a small nod. "I'll attend the summit." She smiled faintly. You always did know how to ruin a quiet day. Comes with the uniform. They stood together for another moment, watching as lightning carved through the distant clouds. Somewhere far below, a siren wailed, a minor breach in the shield dome quickly sealed, but it was enough to remind them both how fragile their world had become. 2 days later, Talon's transport ship, the Halcyon Vale, cut through the void, engines humming like the breath of a sleeping giant. Its hull bore the scars of 100 battles, each plate a patchwork of different alloys salvaged from ships long gone. Inside, the corridors were dimly lit, lined with maintenance panels and data conduits that pulsed with faint blue light. Talon walked the length of the command deck, his boots echoing softly on the metal floor. The crew greeted him with brief nods, their faces taut with the kind of focus born of long campaigns. They were veterans, every one of them, humans who had seen too much and lived anyway. At the helm sat Joran Pell, the ship's navigator. He was older than most, his skin weathered and his hair shot through with silver. His right arm was mechanical from the elbow down, the servos whirring softly as he adjusted the flight controls. Course locked for Helios Station, Joran said without looking up. We'll arrive in 19 hours if the storm lanes hold. They'll hold, Talon said. They always do for us. Joran grunted. You say that like it's a blessing. Maybe it is, Talon said. He made his way to the central console, where the communications officer, a young woman named Senna Vale, was monitoring incoming transmissions. Her hands moved quickly over the holographic controls, her brow furrowed. Picking up scattered chatter from the frontier, she said. Multiple distress signals, most of them cut off mid-transmission. Reclaimer attacks, Talon asked. Could be, she said. But without confirmation, I can't say for certain. The pattern fits, though sudden silence, orbital collapse, total blackout. He leaned over her console. The screen showed a map of the outer systems, dotted with blinking red signals. Each one represented a colony, a world that might already be gone. Save everything, he said. We'll need evidence when we reach Helios. As the ship continued its journey, Talon found himself unable to rest. The stars outside the viewing port stretched into long silver trails, but he saw none of their beauty. All he could see were the ghosts of the past, worlds he'd fought to protect, soldiers he'd buried, promises he'd broken. He remembered the first time he'd seen an Arkan warform up close. It had been on the desert moon of Vessar during the 4th month of the siege. The creature had towered over the battlefield, a fusion of flesh and alloy, its limbs lined with energy conduits that glowed like veins of fire. It moved with a kind of terrible grace, every motion both mechanical and alive. When it spoke, it did so through vibration, a chorus of harmonic frequencies that resonated in the bones. Your kind burns bright, it had said, but everything bright fades. Talon had killed it with a rail cannon to the chest, but its words had stayed with him. Now, watching the stars pass, he wondered if it had been right. Helios Station hung above the blue-white arc of the gas giant Varath, a city of steel suspended in the void. Its spires rose like the ribs of a sleeping god, lit by 1,000 flickering lights. Ships of every size and design drifted nearby, their engines painting soft trails across the darkness. When the Halcyon Vale docked, Talon stepped onto the main concourse and was immediately struck by the noise. The air was alive with voices, traders, diplomats, mercenaries, and refugees all pressed together in the endless tide of humanity. The scent of oil, ozone, and too many bodies filled the air. Myra met him near the central lift. She looked sharper now, her uniform pressed, her expression unreadable. The council's waiting, she said. They're in the upper chamber. Let's get this over with. They took the lift to the upper levels, where the noise faded into a low hum. The walls here were clean, the floors polished metal. Guards in white armor stood at every intersection, their weapons gleaming. When the doors opened, Talon stepped into the council chamber. The room was circular, dominated by a large hollow projector in the center. Around it sat 12 councillors, each representing one of the remaining human systems. They looked up as he entered, some with respect, others with thinly veiled contempt. "Commander Marek," said Counselor Vile, a narrow-faced man with pale eyes. "You honor us with your presence." "I'm not here for honor," Talon said. "I'm here because you called." Vile's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then let us speak plainly. Humanity stands on the edge of collapse. The frontier burns, our fleets are scattered, and our people are losing faith. We called you because we need a symbol, someone the colonies still trust." "You want me to be your banner," Talon said. "We want survival," Vile replied. Talon stepped forward, activating the data crystal. A holographic display bloomed in the air, images of broken worlds, shattered orbitals, cities stripped bare. The room fell silent as the counselors watched. "This is what's coming," Talon said. "The Reclaimers have returned. The Archon are preparing a campaign unlike anything we've seen before. They won't negotiate. They won't occupy. They will harvest." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Counselor Shirin, a woman with steel-gray hair, leaned forward. "If this is true, we have to mobilize the fleet immediately." Vile frowned. "We don't have the resources for a full mobilization. Our shipyards are half-functional, and the outer colonies won't obey a centralized command." "Then we'll die arguing," Talon said. "Unity is the only weapon we have left." Mira stepped forward. "If we form a single command structure, a coalition fleet, we might hold them at the Veil line, but we'll need every ship, every pilot, every engineer." "Impossible," Vile said. "The colonies won't surrender sovereignty. They won't have a world left to rule if they don't," Talon snapped. The room fell silent again. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Counselor Shirin said, "If the Reclaimers are truly coming, then humanity must stand as one. I move to authorize the formation of a unified fleet under Commander Marek's leadership." Vile's expression darkened, but the vote was already shifting. One by one, the counselors raised their hands. When it was done, Talon stood at the center of the chamber, the weight of their decision settling on him like iron. "The coalition fleet is born," Shirin said softly. Talon's gaze swept the room. "Then we fight not for politics or pride. We fight because the stars remember us, and we will not fade quietly." The days that followed the Council's decision were a blur of movement and tension. Across Helios Station, the air hummed with the sound of engines, tools, and voices. Hangar bays that had sat half-empty for years were suddenly alive with activity. Crews welded armor plates onto rusted hulls, engineers tore apart engines scavenged from forgotten wars, and officers argued over star charts that hadn't been updated in decades. Talon Marek stood on the upper platform of Dock 12, overlooking the chaos below. The Halcyon Vale sat in the center of the hangar, surrounded by scaffolding and repair crews. Drones darted around the ship like metallic insects, their welding torches spraying blue light across her battered frame. The smell of ozone and hot metal filled the air. "You've turned this place into a hornet's nest," came Joran's voice behind him. Talon turned. The old navigator was climbing the steps, wiping grease from his mechanical arm with a rag. He wore a faded jacket, with the insignia of the First Frontier Fleet barely visible on the sleeve. The man had seen the rise and fall of more empires than he cared to count. "Better a hornet's nest than a graveyard," Talon said. "Maybe," Joran said, "but at least graveyards don't argue about fuel rations." Talon allowed himself a brief smile. "How's the engine alignment?" "Stable for now," Joran replied, "but the new fusion core they installed from the Varath stockpile wasn't designed for this class of ship. It's got more kick than control. Push it too hard and you'll turn us into a small star. Then we'll just have to fly carefully." Joran snorted. "You don't know the meaning of that word." Before Talon could reply, a voice echoed over the hangar intercom. "Commander Marek, report to tactical operations. Priority 1. Talon exchanged a look with Joran. "Keep the engines steady. I'll see what the crisis is this time." "Same crisis as always," Joran muttered. Someone forgot that hope doesn't fit on a cargo manifest. The tactical operations chamber was a windowless room deep in the station's core. Hollow tables glowed with blue light, displaying fleet schematics and star maps. Myra stood at the center, surrounded by officers and advisors. Her tone was clipped, efficient, every word measured. "Talon," she said as he entered, "you're just in time." He stepped up beside her, scanning the display. A massive cluster of red dots filled the western quadrant of the star map. "What am I looking at?" "Archon movement," Myra said. "Our probes along the Veil line just transmitted this before they were destroyed. Looks like a full-scale formation, 43 capital vessels, nearly 1,000 escorts." Talon's jaw tightened. "And the frontier colonies?" "Evacuation is underway," she said. "But not fast enough. Half the routes are already compromised." He studied the map in silence. The Veil line was humanity's last real border, a barrier of unstable space that separated the inner systems from the wild reaches beyond. The fact that the Archon were crossing it so openly meant they were confident, too confident. "What about the Reclaimers?" he asked. Myra's expression darkened. "They're leading the vanguard." That word again, Reclaimers. It had become a specter that haunted every conversation. The Archons, machines of harvest, towering constructs of metal and flesh that consumed entire cities. "How long until they reach the first colony?" 3 standard weeks, she said. "Maybe less if they use the Rift Gate." Talon's mind was already turning. "Then we don't have time to wait for the fleet to finish assembling. We strike first." Several officers exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a young strategist named Corin Lathe, spoke up. "With respect, Commander, we are barely at 50% operational strength. Attacking now would be suicide." "It would be defiance," Talon said. "And the Archon don't understand defiance. They understand consumption and order. They've never faced an enemy willing to bleed just to make a point." Mira looked at him. "You're talking about a raid." "I'm talking about a message," he said. "We hit their forward logistics fleet before it crosses the Veil. If we cripple their supply lines, we buy time, and time is the only currency we have left." Mira studied him for a long moment. "I can make it happen, but you'll need volunteers." Talon turned toward the officers gathered around the table. "Then let's find out who among us still remembers what it means to be human." That night, the hangar bays filled with volunteers, men and women from a dozen worlds, soldiers and engineers, smugglers and miners, all answering the call. Many wore mismatched uniforms or none at all. Some carried weapons older than they were, yet in their eyes burned the same fire, the stubborn spark that had carried humanity through every catastrophe. Talon moved among them, shaking hands, offering words that felt heavy with ghosts. He saw faces that reminded him of past comrades, voices that echoed memories he'd tried to bury. Myra found him near the supply crates. "You've started a movement," she said quietly. He shook his head. "Movements need ideals. These people just want a chance to fight." "Same thing," she said. He didn't argue. A young mechanic approached them, her hands stained with oil. "Commander, the strike ships are ready. We've fitted the Halcyon Veil with the new plasma lances you requested." "Good work," Talon said. "You ever been in a real fleet action?" She hesitated. "Not one that came back." "Then you're due for a better ending," he said, clapping her shoulder. Her nervous smile faded into something steadier. "We'll make it count, sir." When she walked away, Myra glanced at him. "You always know what to say." "Not always," he said, "just when it matters." The strike fleet launched at dawn, if such a thing could exist in the void. Dozens of ships pulled away from Helios Station, their engines igniting in brilliant cascades of light. Frigates, corvettes, and modified cargo haulers moved in formation, forming a loose wedge around the Halcyon Veil. The sight stirred something deep in Talon's chest, a flicker of pride and something like fear. "Fleet reports ready," Senna's voice came through the comm. All jump coordinates locked. Talon sat in the command chair, feeling the hum of the ship through his bones. "On my mark," he said. "We strike fast, we strike hard, and we leave nothing for them to reclaim." "Understood," Myra said from the tactical console. He raised his hand. "Mark." The stars stretched and tore, and the fleet vanished into the void. The target was a vast convoy of Archon vessels drifting just beyond the Veil line. Automated scanning arrays surrounded them like a metallic halo, harvesting energy from the rift storms. The reclaimer escort ships loomed nearby, hulking leviathans of black metal, their surfaces alive with crawling blue light. When the human fleet dropped out of FTL, the void itself seemed to shudder. Targets acquired, Myra said. Multiple reclaimers on intercept vectors. Hold formation, Talon ordered. Let them come. The first wave hit like a storm. Archon strike craft emerged from the dark, sleek and angular, firing beams of coherent energy that sliced through the blackness. Human ships scattered, returning fire with plasma bursts and rail slugs that lit the void in flashes of blue and gold. The Halcyon Veil plunged into the thick of it. Talon's hands gripped the armrests as the deck shook beneath him. Forward shields at 70%, Senna called. One more hit like that and we lose port stabilization. Then don't let them hit us, Talon said. Myra target their relay nodes. Without coordination, they're just machines. She nodded, fingers flying over the controls, locking plasma lances. The ship's belly glowed as the twin lances charged, the energy buildup vibrating through the hull. A heartbeat later, a beam of pure white light lanced through the void, slicing clean through one of the Archon relay ships. The vessel detonated in a silent bloom of blue fire. Direct hit, Myra shouted. They're breaking formation. Good, Talon said. Press the attack. Human ships surged forward, weaving through debris and laser fire. Smaller corvettes rammed directly into enemy hulls, detonating reactor cores that turned space into a kaleidoscope of destruction. Every explosion was a heartbeat, every death a defiance of inevitability, but the reclaimers adapted quickly. One of them, a colossal warform the size of a city, turned its glowing more toward the Halcyon Veil. Energy gathered in its chest, condensing into a pulsing sphere of light. Evasive, Talon barked. The ship rolled hard as a torrent of plasma erupted from the reclaimer's weapon. The beam grazed the Veil's flank, melting armor and sending a shudder through every deck. Port thrusters offline, Senna cried. We are losing altitude. Stabilize manually, Joran's voice came from the engineering bay. If that thing fires again, we'll be vapor. Talon stared at the massive shape looming on the screen. Its surface shifted and rippled as though alive. He felt an echo, something almost like thought, brush against his mind. Why struggle, little flame? The voice wasn't sound. It was vibration, resonating in his bones. You burn bright for a moment, then fade. We remember the ash. He gritted his teeth. You'll remember our fire instead. He slammed his hand on the comm. All ships concentrate fire on the reclaimer, everything you've got. Dozens of human vessels turn their weapons toward the giant. Plasma, kinetic rounds, and iron bursts converged on a single point. The reclaimer's shields flared, then shattered. Its armor began to melt, its energy weapon flickering out. Now, Myra shouted. Veil full lance discharge, Talon gave the command. The Halcyon Veil unleashed both plasma lances at once, twin beams that tore through the reclaimer's core. The creature machine let out a soundless wail, its body convulsing before it imploded into a swirl of radiant particles. For a moment, silence reigned. Then cheers erupted across the comms. We did it, Senna cried. The reclaimer's down. Talon didn't smile. Form up and retreat. The rest of the fleet will regroup at Helios. But now, he said, before they send reinforcements. As the fleet turned away, the wreckage of the fallen reclaimer drifted silently behind them, glowing faintly against the endless dark. When they returned to Helios, the station's lights burned brighter than ever. The docks were filled with cheering crews, the sound echoing through the corridors. For the first time in decades, humanity had struck first and won. In the command chamber, the council gathered once more. Vile's face was pale as he watched the battle footage. You destroyed a reclaimer, he said, disbelief in his tone. No one has ever done that. Talon stood with his arms crossed. It can be done. They bleed same as we do. Your actions were reckless, Vile said. If the Archon retaliate, they will, Talon said. But now they know we're not prey. Mira stepped forward. Our victory rallied every colony. Recruitment has tripled in 48 hours. The coalition fleet is forming faster than any of us hoped. Councillor Shirin smiled faintly. For the first time in years, our people believe again. Talon's gaze remained fixed on the holographic map. The red cluster marking Arkan space seemed to pulse, almost alive. Belief is good, he said softly, but belief alone won't save us. They'll come harder next time, and we'll be ready, Myra said. He looked at her, saw the same fire reflected in her eyes, and felt something stir deep inside, a memory of what it meant to hope. Later, alone in his quarters aboard the Halcyon Vale, Talon watched the stars drift by through the viewport. His reflection looked back at him, tired eyes, unshaven jaw, the scar-catching faint light. The ship's hum was steady, almost soothing. He thought of the Reclaimer's words, "You burn bright for a moment, then fade." He whispered to the stars, "Then let us burn bright enough to be remembered." The ship's intercom chimed softly. Myra's voice came through. "We're receiving a coded transmission from beyond the veil." Talon straightened. "From who?" "Not sure," she said, "but it's human." He frowned. "That's impossible." "Not anymore," she said. "You'd better see this." He rose, heart beating faster than it had in years, because if there were humans beyond the veil, then everything they thought they knew about the war, about survival itself, was about to change. The transmission was weak, fractured by interference, ghosted by the magnetic storms that always rippled around the veil line. On the command deck of the Halcyon Vale, the air felt heavy with anticipation. Every crew member had stopped what they were doing, drawn to the flickering hologram that shimmered above the main console. "Bring it up," Talon said quietly. Senna nodded and adjusted the signal stabilizers. The hologram resolved into static, then into the faint outline of a human face. The image flickered in and out, but the voice that followed was unmistakably human. "This is Captain Raylan Voss of the Vanguard Expedition. We are trapped beyond the veil. Do not, repeat, do not engage the Arkan Reclamation Fleet. They are not what they seem. We discovered..." The signal fractured again, breaking into a high-pitched whine. Joran muttered under his breath, "Vanguard? That name is from the old Outer Expansion era. They vanished 30 years ago." Senna frowned as she worked the controls. "The transmission's old, but it's being rebroadcast from somewhere recent. The signal has been looped through a relay station. Someone wants us to hear it." "Can you trace it?" Myra asked. "Maybe," Senna said. "It's coming from the far side of the veil, near the storm belt around Theta Arcanis." Talon stepped closer, his mind racing. The Vanguard expedition had been humanity's first attempt to cross the veil permanently, searching for habitable worlds beyond known space. They had disappeared without a trace, their fate written off as a casualty of the rift storms. If their signal was real, then someone or something had survived. "Replay it," Talon said. The voice came again, breaking through the static. "They're using our dead. The Reclaimers, they're not machines, they're built from us, from the ones they take. Don't let them cross the veil. Burn everything. Do not." The hologram collapsed into static once more, and the console went dark. A long silence followed. "Finally," Myra said, "he said they're built from us." Talon's expression hardened. "That's what I heard." Joran crossed his arms. "If it's true, that explains the resonance. The Reclaimers always moved like they remembered how we fight." Senna looked pale. "You think they're human?" "Not anymore," Myra said, "but maybe once." Talon turned toward the viewport. The stars beyond the veil pulsed faintly, the storms like veins of fire cutting through the blackness. If what Voss said is true, then the Arkan aren't just harvesting resources, they're harvesting us. They brought the data to the Council on Helios Station the next day. The chamber was filled with tension thick enough to taste. The holographic replay of the transmission played again, the voice of Captain Voss echoing through the room. When it ended, the councillors looked shaken. "That can't be real," Councillor Vile said. "It's an old distress signal. The Arkan may have fabricated it to sow panic." "It's real," Talon said flatly. "I've seen what they do to prisoners. We always assumed they vanished. Now we know where they went." Councillor Shirin spoke softly. "If the Reclaimers are built from human remains, then every battle we lose strengthens them. That's why we need to confirm it," Myra said. "We locate the source of the broadcast and find out what's left of the Vanguard expedition." Vile slammed his fist on the table. Absolutely not. Crossing the veil is suicide. The rift storms would tear a fleet apart. Not a fleet, Talon said. A single ship. Vile's eyes narrowed. You mean yours? Talon didn't look away. We built the Halcyon Veil for this. Reinforced hull, dual cores, adaptive shielding. If any ship can make the crossing, it's ours. You'd risk your crew for a ghost signal? Vile demanded. I'd risk it for truth, Talon said. If we understand what the Archon have become, we might learn how to stop them. Counselor Shirin looked from Talon to Myra, then back again. You'll have no reinforcements, no rescue if it goes wrong. It always goes wrong, Talon said. That's what makes us human. Preparations began immediately. The Halcyon Veil was refitted with storm stabilizers and deep space rift shields. The crew worked tirelessly, their movements driven by the unspoken knowledge that this mission was unlike any they'd undertaken before. Myra oversaw the final checks in the engine bay, standing beside Joran as he calibrated the storm field generator. Last chance to back out, Joran said. Once we cross the veil, we're in uncharted space. No comms, no nav boys, no way home unless we find it ourselves. She smiled faintly. You say that like it's new, he grunted. You ever think about retirement? Every time I strap into a ship, she said, but the universe keeps giving me reasons to wait. He tightened the last coupling and straightened. Then let's make sure this one's worth it. When Talon arrived on the deck, the crew was already at their stations. The hum of the ship felt heavier somehow, like the breath before a plunge into deep water. Course locked, he asked. Locked and ready, Senna said. Veil breach window opens in 2 minutes. Mira met his gaze. No one has ever made it across and back. Talon gave a thin smile. Then we'll just have to be the first. He turned toward the viewport. Beyond it, the veil shimmered like liquid glass, an ocean of light and darkness interwoven. The ship vibrated as the storm field powered up, wrapping the hull in a faint blue glow. Engage engines, Talon said. The stars stretched, warped, and then the world dissolved into chaos. Crossing the veil was like flying through a broken mirror. Fragments of space bent and twisted, colors bled into one another, and the laws of physics trembled at the edges. The ship groaned as gravitational eddies pulled at its hull, and energy discharges lit the void in flashes of emerald and gold. Field integrity at 70%, Senna shouted. The storm is stronger than predicted. Hold course, Talon barked. Don't fight the pull, ride it. The ship shuddered violently as a wave of spatial distortion hit. Alarms wailed, lights flickered, and the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate. Joran cursed loudly over the comms as systems overloaded one by one. Engine coolant pressure spiking. If we stay in the current, we'll melt the drive. Adjust the harmonics, Myra ordered. Match the storm frequency. Talon gritted his teeth, feeling the ship tremble beneath him like a living thing. The stars outside blurred into streaks of white fire, then snapped back into focus. And suddenly they were through. The turbulence vanished. The sensors stabilized. The ship floated in silence above an unfamiliar starfield. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Joran exhaled shakily. By the void, we made it. Senna checked her instruments. We are definitely not in known space. Star patterns don't match anything in the registry. Talon leaned forward. Any sign of the signal? Picking it up faintly, she said. Bearing 280 Mark 6. Range 30,000 kilometers. Take us in. As they moved closer, the source of the signal came into view, a vast structure drifting in the dark. It was massive, easily the size of a city, its surface a blend of metallic lattice and organic growth. Parts of it glowed faintly with blue light, others pulsed like veins under skin. Is that a station? Myra said quietly. Joran frowned. If it is, it's not ours. Senna's voice trembled. The signal S coming from inside. Talon stared at the structure. It reminded him of the Reclaimers, but larger, more deliberate, not a weapon, something else. A cradle, a hive. Prepare a boarding team, he said. We're going in. They approached in a small shuttle, the Halcyon Veil holding position at a safe distance. The alien station loomed ahead, its hull scarred and ancient. The docking bay they found was wide open, like a mouth waiting to swallow them. The shuttle's lights swept across twisted metal and what looked like ossified bone. Symbols, carved in a language that made no sense, lined the walls. When the landing gear touched down, the silence was absolute. "Atmosphere?" Myra asked. "Thin, but breathable," Joran said. "Oxygen traces match human standard." "Then someone built this for us, or from us," Talon said. They stepped out, weapons drawn. Their boots echoed against the strange floor, a material that felt halfway between metal and flesh. The air carried a faint hum, like distant singing, but without rhythm or tone. As they moved deeper into the corridor, the lights began to react to their presence. Dim blue veins pulsed along the walls, following their movements. The effect was unnerving, like being watched by something too vast to comprehend. They reached a central chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center stood a stasis pod made of translucent crystal, cables and conduits running into it from every direction. Inside was a human. The man's face was pale, his body suspended in fluid. His eyes were closed, but his chest rose and fell faintly. "By the stars," Myra whispered, "he's alive." Senna scanned the pod. Cryogenic stasis, but the design's hybrid, human and Arkan technology. The systems are maintaining him. Talon approached slowly. "Identification," she ran the scan again. "Captain Raylan Voss." The name hit like a thunderclap. "The one from the transmission," Joran said. "He's been here all this time." Before anyone could speak, the pod lights flared and Voss's eyes snapped open. The fluid drained rapidly and the pod hissed open. The man inside stumbled forward, collapsing onto his knees. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and faint lines of blue light traced along his veins. Myra crouched beside him. "Captain Voss, can you hear me?" He lifted his head slowly. His eyes glowed faintly, and when he spoke, his voice was hoarse but clear. "You shouldn't have come." Talon stepped forward. "We received your signal. You warned us about the reclaimers." Voss nodded weakly. "It's too late. They're not what you think." "Then tell us what they are." He looked at them, pain flickering across his features. "The Arkan weren't trying to destroy us. They were trying to perfect us." Mira frowned. "Perfect us?" Voss reached up, touching the blue lines beneath his skin. "When we crossed the veil, we found something, an intelligence older than the Arkan themselves. They called it the Architect. It reshapes life to preserve it. The Arkan served it once. Now they've turned its purpose into conquest." He shuddered. "The Reclaimers are built from those it deems incomplete. Human, Arkan, it doesn't matter. The Architect remakes us all." Talon's stomach turned. "Remakes us into what?" "Into silence," Voss said softly. "Into things that no longer question." The walls around them pulsed with light. The humming grew louder. Myra spun toward the entrance. "We've triggered something." Voss staggered to his feet. "It knows you're here. You need to leave now." The floor trembled. Metal tendrils began to emerge from the walls, twisting and coiling like serpents. "Move," Talon shouted. They ran for the shuttle as the station came alive around them. The walls shifted, closing corridors, reshaping themselves. Myra fired her rifle at a tendril that reached for her, severing it with a burst of plasma. The severed end bled blue light before retracting. They burst into the hangar bay, the hum now a roar. The shuttle's engines were already hot as they leaped aboard. "Go," Talon barked. The shuttle tore free just as the station began to collapse inward, folding in on itself like paper burning from the edges. A shockwave rippled outward, scattering debris across space. On board, Voss sat slumped in a harness, trembling. "It's awake," he whispered. "The Architect knows humanity is still alive." Talon stared out the viewport as the station vanished into a swirl of light and darkness. "Then we'd better teach it what being alive means." Back aboard the Halcyon Vale, Voss was transferred to medbay. The ship's sensors recorded strange readings from his body, energy signatures unlike anything in human physiology. "He's changing," Senna said quietly as she watched the monitors. "Whatever they did to him, it's still happening." Talon stood beside her. "Can you stop it?" "I can try," she said, "but if I do, we might lose whatever he knows." Mira entered, her expression grim. "Incoming transmission from Helios Station." They picked up a massive Arkan fleet forming near the Veil line, thousands of ships. They're moving toward human space. Talon's eyes hardened. Then the war's about to begin. He looked back at Voss, whose eyes fluttered open once more. The glow beneath his skin brightened. Talon, he whispered. The architect, it learns. Every act of defiance you make, it adapts. But it fears one thing. What? Talon asked. Voss's voice was barely a breath. It fears memory. Then his body convulsed, and the monitors erupted in static. Myra stepped back. What does that mean? Talon's gaze was distant, his thoughts already moving ahead. It means we're going to remind the universe what humanity remembers best. He turned toward the bridge. Prepare for jump. We are heading home. The return through the veil was not as violent as the first crossing, but it was far from gentle. The Halcyon Veil emerged battered, its hull scorched from energy discharges and its crew running on little more than endurance and willpower. When the ship dropped back into human space, a cheer rose from the deck, short, restrained, but real. Helios Station was waiting. The sight of its spires brought a wave of relief that Talon refused to let show. The station hung like a jewel in the blackness, its lights pulsing across the curve of the gas giant Vareth below. But beyond that beauty lurked the unignorable reality, the Arkan fleet. Even from this distance, long-range sensors painted the sky with red. Thousands of signatures moving in perfect formation, reclaimers, war carriers, and constructs the size of cities. The invasion had begun. Docking was rushed. Crews swarmed the Halcyon Veil, dragging power cables, rearming turrets, sealing hull fractures. Talon stepped off the boarding ramp and was met immediately by Counselor Shirin. She looked as if she had not slept in days, her eyes red but her voice steady. You found something beyond the veil. We found Captain Voss, Talon said, and we found the truth behind the reclaimers. He handed her the data crystal, everything we recorded, their purpose, their origin, the architect. Shirin turned the crystal over in her hands. An intelligence that reshapes life to preserve it, and the Arkan turned it into a weapon. Now it's awake, Talon said, and it knows we exist. Her eyes darkened. Then we must prepare for annihilation. Talon shook his head. Not annihilation, assimilation, that's what it does. It will remake us, erase what we are, but there's a flaw. Shirin looked up sharply. A flaw, Voss said. It fears memory, Talon said. That's what makes us dangerous. We remember, we evolve because we carry our past forward. It wants stability. We thrive on chaos. Shirin's mouth tightened. Then chaos must become our weapon. Hours later, the council convened for what would become their final meeting before war. The chamber was packed. Officers, strategists, engineers, and representatives from every surviving colony. Holomaps covered the walls, displaying fleets and defense grids. Vile spoke first. The Arkan advance is already through the frontier. They'll reach the Veil line in 6 days. If they breach it, they'll reach Helios within the week. Mira stood at Talon's side, her hands clasped behind her back. Our fleet is strong but divided. The colonies still argue over command hierarchy. Then they'll die arguing, Talon said. We can't fight this war planet by planet. We have to strike where it hurts, at the architect itself. Vile scoffed. You propose attacking a god? I propose attacking its faith, Talon said. It's not omnipotent. It learns, it adapts. That means it can make mistakes. If we can draw it into a trap, force it to reveal how it controls the reclaimers, we might sever its link to them. Shirin looked thoughtful. You want to attack its mind. Exactly. It doesn't fear destruction. It fears corruption. Its memories turned against it. If we can introduce chaos into its network, we can make it doubt itself. How? Vile asked. Talon glanced at Myra. She activated a hologram, a schematic of the alien station they had found beyond the veil. This architecture matches the signal frequencies of the reclaimer fleet. Every unit they deploy transmits on a harmonic link, part of a shared consciousness. If we can infect that link with a divergent pattern, something unpredictable, it could fracture their control. A virus, Shirin said slowly. Not digital, Myra replied. Human, emotion, memory, individuality. They don't understand it, and that makes it poison to them. Vile leaned back. You speak of poetry, not strategy. Talon's voice was steel. Poetry built the first ships that took us to the stars. Poetry made men and women believe they could defy gravity. It's the oldest weapon we have. The room fell silent. Finally, Shirin nodded. Then we make ready. If we fall, let it be on our feet. The next 3 days blurred into relentless preparation. Fleets from every corner of human space converged on the Helios system. Warships, freighters converted into carriers, civilian vessels armed with salvaged rail cannons, all drawn together by the simple promise that this would be humanity's last stand. The orbital docks became a city of motion and sound. Shields flared, engines roared, communications flooded every frequency. Even the broken and the afraid found purpose. On the Halcyon Vale, Talon oversaw the integration of a new weapon, one that might decide everything. It was not large, nor was it beautiful. It looked like a cluster of crystal shards suspended in a magnetic field, humming faintly with stored energy. "This is what you're calling the memory core?" Joran asked, eyeing it warily. "It's built from Voss's neural data," Myra said. "His memories of the architect's signal frequencies merged with human emotional patterns. When we release it, it'll broadcast unpredictability into the network, memories, dreams, fear, love, everything that makes us what we are." Joran rubbed his jaw. "And if it doesn't work, then we'll have given them a taste of humanity before we die," Talon said. The night before the battle, the station dimmed its lights. Across the fleet, crews took one final rest before dawn that would never come. Talon stood alone on the observation deck, looking down at Varath's swirling clouds. The gas giant reflected soft blue light across his face. His reflection in the glass looked older than he remembered. Myra joined him quietly. "You should sleep." "Can't," he said. "Too much left to think about." She leaned against the railing. "You've done everything you could. The rest is up to them now." He smiled faintly. "I've never been good at letting go." She studied him for a moment. "Do you believe we'll win?" He was silent a long time before answering. "I believe we'll be remembered." "That's not the same thing." "No," he said softly. "It's better." The Archon came with the dawn. The sky above Varath split open as their fleet emerged. Thousands of vessels, each one pulsing with the cold blue light of the architect's design. The largest of them dwarfed cities, shaped like skeletal wings unfolding across the stars. Humanity's fleet rose to meet them. The combined armada of the colonies formed a shimmering wall of light, engines flaring, weapons locked. For the first time in generations, they were united, not by politics or power, but by the shared knowledge that this was the end. Talon stood on the command deck, Myra beside him, the crew at their stations. "Signal the fleet," he said. "This is Commander Marek of the Coalition. To every ship within range, today we remind the stars who we are. Stand with us, fight with us, and let the universe remember our name." The comm channels erupted with voices, affirmations, battle cries, prayers. The sound rolled across the fleet like thunder. Then the two armadas collided. The first wave was chaos. Energy beams slashed across the void, tearing through hulls and scattering debris like glittering dust. Human ships fought in tight formations, using the debris fields as cover. The Archon moved in perfect synchronization, their patterns too precise, too mechanical. "Shields at 70%, Senna shouted. "Enemy warforms closing fast. Target the relay ships," Myra ordered. "Cut their coordination." The Halcyon Vale dove through a field of wreckage, plasma lances firing in rhythmic bursts. Each shot tore through an enemy ship, but for every one destroyed, two more appeared. Joran's voice crackled over the comms. "Engine temperatures climbing. We can't keep this up." "Just hold the line," Talon said. "We only need a window." The fleet's center began to buckle under the relentless assault. Massive reclaimers advanced, harvesting wreckage and bodies alike, converting them into new warforms in real time. It was like watching death evolve. Then, in the distance, something vast stirred. The architect revealed itself. It appeared not as a ship, but as a distortion, a ripple across space, like a reflection on a broken mirror. Its true shape defied understanding, shifting constantly, as though the universe itself struggled to contain it. Every reclaimer in the fleet turned toward it, their lights dimming in reverence. "It's here," Myra whispered. Talon stared at the impossible shape. "Then let's finish this." "Memory core ready," Myra said. Charging sequence initiated. The device began to hum, the crystal shards spinning faster, emitting a soft, rhythmic pulse. It wasn't mechanical, it sounded alive. The Archons sensed it. The Reclaimers broke formation, converging on the Halcyon Veil. Massive energy beams streaked across space, lighting the dark like veins of lightning. "Full power to shields," Talon shouted. "Protect the core." The ship shook violently as a blast grazed the hull, sending sparks raining from the ceiling. Senna's hands flew over her console. "Shield capacity down to 20%. We can't take another hit like that." "Then we don't," Talon said. Myra released the core. She hesitated only a second before pressing the command. The memory core detached from its containment field and drifted out into space, spinning slowly. As it activated, waves of light rippled outward, invisible to the eye but felt in every mind. Then it began to sing. Not a sound of machinery, but of voices, millions of them, layered together in a harmony of grief and defiance. Every memory, every loss, every triumph of humanity was woven into that sound. The voices of forgotten soldiers, lovers, explorers, and children echoed across the stars. The Reclaimers faltered. Their formation broke. The lights along their hulls flickered erratically, and their weapons hesitated mid-charge. "It's working," Myra said in disbelief. "They're remembering." On the sensors, the impossible happened. Some of the Reclaimers stopped attacking altogether. A few even turned their weapons on their own. The Architect reacted. The distortion pulsed violently, sending waves of energy that tore through both fleets. Entire ships vanished in bursts of white light, but the memory core held. Its song grew louder, brighter. Talon gripped the railing, his voice low but firm. "Broadcast fleet-wide, all channels, every ship, every world, add your voice." Mira nodded, tears streaking down her cheeks as she relayed the order. Across the fleet, humans began to sing, not in unison, not perfectly, but together, millions of voices filling the void. The Archon hesitated. The Architect shuddered. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Then the Halcyon Veil's sensors flared red. "The Architect is overloading," Senna shouted. "It's collapsing the entire field. Get us clear," Talon ordered. Joran's voice came from engineering, strained. "Drive S gone, we're caught in the gravity well." Mira looked at him. "We can't outrun it." Talon met her gaze. "We don't have to." He turned to the crew. "Divert all power to the core. If it's dying, let it take us with it. Better to be part of the memory than forgotten." The crew moved without hesitation. Energy surged through the conduits, flooding into the crystal. The light grew unbearable. The last thing Talon saw was Myra's face, calm amid the chaos, her hand finding his. And then there was light. When the light faded, there was only silence. The void was empty. The Architect was gone. Fragments of ships drifted quietly where the battle had been. Some still burned with the dying glow of fusion cores, others floated cold and dark. Helios Station remained, scarred but intact. The surviving fleets orbited it slowly, their comms filled with disbelief. Myra's voice came through the static, faint but alive. "This is the Halcyon Veil, we're still here." Cheers erupted across every channel. Humanity had survived, but Talon was gone. They found no trace of him, only the shattered remnants of the bridge and a faint echo in the comm systems. When they replayed it, it was not a message, but a whisper carried on static. "The stars remember." In the months that followed, the Archon withdrew beyond the veil. The Reclaimers that remained were inert, their lights extinguished. Some were salvaged, others left to drift as monuments. The colonies rebuilt. The coalition became more than a desperate alliance, it became the seed of something greater. Myra took command of the new fleet, her name spoken with reverence. Joran retired at last. His mechanical arm hung above the engine room of the Veil as a reminder of those who never stopped fighting. And across every world, people looked to the sky, not in fear, but in wonder. Because they knew the universe would never forget them again. Helios Station drifted through the slow quiet of aftermath. Where once the void had thundered with fire and death, now there was only the whisper of solar winds brushing debris fields that glimmered like constellations reborn. The battle was over. The architect was gone, but victory never came without ghosts. In the days that followed, the surviving ships of the coalition fleet became an armada of mourners. They moved in slow procession around Varath, their running lights dimmed to the color of dusk. For every ship that survived, 10 had fallen. The names of the lost were transmitted on every open channel, a litany of human persistence echoing across the stars. For the fallen of Asterion. For the crew of the Dawn's Mercy. For Commander Talon Marek of the Halcyon Vale. Each name became a note in a requiem that seemed to stretch into eternity. Myra Callan stood at the viewport of the command deck, her reflection framed by the wreckage beyond. Her uniform was scorched in places, the insignia of the coalition fleet newly stitched above her heart. It still felt alien to her, heavy with expectation. Behind her, the quiet hum of the engines filled the space. Senna sat at the communications console, eyes rimmed red but steady. Joran stood near the engineering readout, his mechanical hand resting against the console like a man greeting an old friend. Myra's voice was calm when she finally spoke. Transmit the full casualty list to the council. Senna hesitated. Do you want to include Commander Marek as confirmed? Mira's throat tightened. Nobody, no confirmation, mark him missing in action. Joran looked up. After what we saw, he's gone, Myra. The veil tore everything apart. She turned to face him, and yet we are still here. Until I see proof otherwise, he's not dead. He studied her a moment, then nodded. Missing then. The silence returned, softer this time. Later, when the shift changed and the lights dimmed, Myra made her way to the observation deck. The glass dome stretched high overhead, the stars spilling across it like spilled diamonds. She closed her eyes and let the memory return, the sound of the memory core's song, the light swallowing everything, Talon's hand in hers. When she opened her eyes again, she whispered, "You said the stars remember, I hope they do." The next day, the Coalition Council reconvened. The chamber was smaller now, not by design but by absence. Many of the seats were empty, the representatives who had filled them now gone, their worlds reduced to ash and echoes. Councillor Shirin presided, her voice steady despite the weight she carried. "We stand in the shadow of survival," she said, "but survival is not victory. The architect is gone, but the reclaimers left behind are still a danger. Some lie dormant, others wander the outer systems without purpose. We must decide what to do with them." Mira stood at the center of the room, her uniform bearing the scars of the battle. "We disarm what we can, destroy what we can't. But we also study them. The architect may have fallen, but its knowledge, its understanding of adaptation, is beyond anything we've built. If we can learn from it, we might prevent another war." Vile's replacement, a young counselor from the core worlds, frowned. "And risk awakening it again? You'd gamble the future of humanity for technology." "I'd gamble everything to ensure we're never this vulnerable again," Myra said. Shirin nodded slowly. "Then it's settled. A new division will be formed, the Department of Exo-Integration. You'll oversee it, Admiral Callan." Mira blinked. "Admiral?" Shirin allowed herself a faint smile. "You led humanity's first true victory against extinction. It seems fitting." Mira bowed her head slightly. "Then I'll accept on one condition." "Name it." "That we don't build another weapon, we build a future." The council chamber murmured with cautious approval. Shirin's smile widened, tired but genuine. "Then go, Admiral, begin the work." The following months were a blur of construction, salvage, and uneasy peace. The coalition became more than a wartime pact. It became a new civilization. The colonies that had once quarreled over territory now traded freely, bound by shared scars. Helios Station became the heart of this new unity. Its docks expanded, its halls filled with voices from every world, scientists, engineers, farmers, and refugees working side by side. The shipyards began producing not warships, but exploration vessels. Humanity was rebuilding not for conquest, but curiosity. And through it all, Myra worked tirelessly. Under her guidance, the Department of Exo-Integration recovered fragments of reclaimer technology, half-organic, half-mechanical constructs that seemed to hum faintly when exposed to human presence. They were inert, but not dead. Some of them responded to sound, others to touch, as if listening for something they had lost. Myra often wondered if they were mourning. One evening, months after the battle, Myra walked through one of the containment hangars. The air smelled of ozone and cold metal. Rows of reclaimer shells hung suspended by magnetic fields, colossal forms that once devoured worlds, now nothing more than statues. She stopped before one that towered over her. Its surface was pitted and scarred, but beneath the damage she could still see the faint lines of bioluminescent veins. They pulsed faintly, as though something within still remembered being alive. Her hand brushed against the surface. "What are you now?" she murmured. The reclaimer's light flickered in response. Myra froze. "Senna, record this." The light pulsed again, slow, rhythmic, not random. "Deliberate," Senna's voice crackled over the comm. "Admiral, we're getting an energy spike from that unit. You need to step back." But Myra didn't move. She watched as the light formed a pattern, a sequence of long and short pulses. "Translate it," she said quietly. Senna's hands flew across the console. "It's a code, old signal format, human but not." "What does it say?" The answer came after a long pause. "It says, we remember." The message spread through the station like wildfire. Scientists crowded the hangars, studying the reclaimer remnants as they pulsed faintly with light. Each unit began to emit similar signals, fragmented, incomplete, but undeniably alive. Some believed it was merely a remnant of the architect's programming. Others whispered that Talon Marek's memory core had done more than destroy, it had transformed. Myra stood among the researchers, watching the lights flicker like a field of stars. "They're not machines anymore," she said softly. "They're echoes." "Echoes of what?" Joran asked. "Of us." Weeks passed, and the phenomenon grew. Across the outer systems, derelict reclaimers began transmitting faint human signals, snatches of old broadcasts, voices long dead, fragments of songs. The universe itself seemed to be remembering. Helios Station received the first clear transmission. It came through the long-range array, a single voice carried across the void. The technicians almost dismissed it as interference until they heard the words. "Myra," she ran to the control room, heart hammering. "Play it again." The voice repeated, distorted but unmistakable. "Myra, the stars remember." Joran stared at the screen. "It can't be." "It is," she whispered. "It's him." The signal originated from beyond the veil, from the place where the architect had died. Every sane voice in the council argued against following it. They said it was a trick, a lingering echo, perhaps even a trap. But Myra didn't listen. She gathered a crew, volunteers, every one of them, and prepared the Halcyon Vale for one final journey. Before departure, Shirin met her at the dock. "You know you might not come back." Mira smiled faintly. "Neither did he. I owe him that much." Shirin nodded. "Then go, but if you find him, tell him humanity endures." The Halcyon Vale crossed the Veil line once more. The space beyond was as silent and surreal as before, filled with drifting fragments of shattered Arkan constructs. But amid the ruin, new shapes had begun to form, metal fused with crystal, growing like coral from the remains. "It's rebuilding," Senna said in awe. "But not like before. These structures, they're human in design." Mira's breath caught. He changed it. They followed the signal deeper, through clouds of luminescent dust that shimmered like frozen fire. At the center of it all, they found what was left of the architect, or perhaps what it had become. It was no longer a distortion, but a structure, a vast lattice of energy and matter shaped like a cathedral floating in the void. At its heart burned a single sphere of light. The signal pulsed from within. "Myra." They approached slowly, weapons offline. The closer they drew, the more the ship systems began to resonate with the frequency. Voices whispered faintly through the hull, fragments of memories, laughter, tears. Senna looked up from her console. Admiral, it's not just one voice, it's thousands. I know, Myra said. She stepped toward the viewport, eyes fixed on the sphere. Open a channel. The light flared. A voice filled the bridge, soft and familiar. You came. Mira swallowed hard. Talon, I'm not what I was, the voice said. The core merged with the architect's network. I tried to contain it, but instead I became part of it, part of everything. Mira's eyes strung. We thought you died. I did, he said, but death wasn't the end. Not this time. The architect's network couldn't erase what we are, it absorbed it. Every memory, every voice, I can hear them all now. What do you want us to do? Live, he said simply. The architect feared memory because it couldn't control it. But now it's learning, it's changing. It wants to create, not consume. It needs a guide. Mira understood. You want me to teach it. You already have, he said. It remembers your voice. It remembers hope. The light dimmed slightly like a sigh. Go home, Myra, build something better. I'll watch the stars for you. She pressed her hand against the glass. Will I ever see you again? A pause, then softly, every time you look up. The sphere flared once, brilliant and pure, then faded into the lattice until only starlight remained. When the halcyon veil returned through the veil, the universe felt different. The stars seemed brighter, closer, as if watching. Myra stepped onto the deck of Helios Station once more, her heart heavy but full. The people gathered to greet her, eyes wide with questions she couldn't answer. All she said was, he's still out there, and he's not alone. Years passed. The coalition grew into a civilization spanning dozens of worlds. The old wounds of war faded, replaced by something stronger, curiosity. Children learned the names of the fallen as easily as they learned constellations. Pilots still spoke of the day humanity sang the stars awake. And sometimes, when the night was clear and the winds were still, the reclaimer relics would flicker with faint light, pulses like a heartbeat, whispering a single phrase through the quiet cosmos. We remember. The first sunrise over the new world of Harvin rose blood orange through clouds of dust and crystal. From orbit, it looked like an ember cupped in the dark palm of space. But on the surface, the world was alive with motion. Machines hummed across the plains, guided by human hands and human dreams. Towers of silver and glass rose from red earth, threaded with veins of bioluminescent alloy. At their hearts, living reactors pulsed softly, descendants of reclaimer technology, now re-engineered for creation rather than destruction. The colony's founding banner snapped in the wind. It bore a single emblem, a hand reaching toward a star. Myra Callan stood at the edge of the construction ridge, dust swirling around her boots, the air sharp with ozone and iron. Behind her stretched the settlement, rows of habitation domes, growing gardens, children chasing drones that had once been designed for war. A new age had begun. It had been 15 years since the day the architect fell. 15 years since humanity sang its defiance into the void and remade the meaning of survival. The coalition had become the Union of Worlds, a loose, democratic alliance of systems dedicated to exploration, rebuilding, and remembrance. And here on Harvane, they were building the first true city of the new era, Haven Prime. The sound of footsteps crunched behind her. Joran Pell approached, older now, his beard white and his gait uneven from years of mechanical wear. His replacement arm had been rebuilt too, sleeker, almost elegant, forged from the same living metal that powered the colony's reactors. He stopped beside her, squinting against the glare. You still wake before dawn. Mira smiled faintly. Habit. The stars look different when the sun's not up yet. He followed her gaze skyward. The faint crescent of Helios Station was visible even here, orbiting far above. Never thought I'd see the day when Helios wasn't just a fortress. Now it's a university, Myra said, and a museum. They teach the songs there, the ones from the battle. Joran chuckled softly. Good, wouldn't want the young to think we were all myths. Mira's smile faded a little. They already do. Later that morning, the colony's central square filled with people. It was Foundation Day, the anniversary of the Reclaimer War's end. Across the Union, worlds celebrated with parades, light shows, and remembrance vigils. But here, the ceremony was quieter, built on reverence rather than spectacle. Children carried torches of plasma light, each representing a fallen world. Behind them came engineers and farmers, scientists and explorers, every profession that had rebuilt civilization from ruin. At the square's center stood the Remembrance Spire, a column of crystal that hummed faintly when approached. The lights within it shifted and pulsed in patterns that mirrored the heartbeat of the observer. It had been grown, not built, from fragments of the original memory core. When Myra stepped forward to speak, the crowd fell silent. She wore no uniform, only a simple white coat marked with the emblem of the Union. Her voice carried across the wind. 15 years ago, we stood on the edge of extinction. We believed ourselves small, fragile against the cold immensity of the universe. And then we learned that even the smallest voice can echo across eternity. Her eyes swept the crowd. We remember those who gave everything so we could stand here. Commander Talon Marek, Captain Voss, the crews of the Halcyon Vale, the Vanguard Star, the Echo's Flame, the nameless millions who sang when there was no reason left to sing. She paused. They are the foundation on which we build, and we will honor them not by repeating their wars, but by continuing their dream. A child in the front row asked, barely a whisper, "What dream?" Mira smiled gently. "That humanity would not just survive, but matter." The spire pulsed brighter. The hum deepened, almost musical. Around it, the people began to sing, not the battle hymn of the past, but something new, a softer melody, a song of beginnings. When the ceremony ended, Myra lingered alone at the spire. The crowd drifted away, their voices fading into laughter and life. She placed a hand on the crystal surface. It was cool beneath her fingers. "I still look up," she said quietly. "Every night, I keep hoping you're looking back." For a moment, there was no response, only the gentle thrum of energy. Then, faintly, the spire shimmered. A pattern of light spiraled across it, an old code, one she hadn't seen in years. "We remember." Myra laughed softly through sudden tears. "So do I." That night, she walked through the settlement's outer perimeter, where the domes thinned and the wild lands began. The stars stretched endlessly overhead, and somewhere out there, beyond the veil, the architect's transformed lattice still glowed, now a nebula visible even from this distance. They called it the Marek Veil. Ships from the Union traveled there often now, sending back data, images, and sometimes strange artifacts that seemed half alive. The nebula itself pulsed with light at irregular intervals, signals that, when decoded, formed music. No one knew how. Some said it was the architect learning to dream. Myra liked to think it was Talon still speaking. The following week, a new transmission reached Helios Station from beyond the veil. It was faint, fragmented, but undeniably deliberate. The technicians relayed it to Myra directly. She listened in silence as the message played, a familiar voice woven through static. "We are becoming." It wasn't a warning, it wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Myra looked up at the stars and whispered, "Then become something beautiful." 5 years later, the Union launched its most ambitious project yet, the Horizon Array. It would stretch across dozens of systems, linking worlds through instantaneous quantum gates. A living network of light and thought, inspired by what the architect once was, but built on human will. The lead construction ship, Elysian Path, was christened under Myra's supervision. As it departed orbit, thousands gathered on Helios Station's upper decks to watch. The ship's engines lit the void, trailing threads of silver energy. Senna, now captain of her own vessel, stood beside Myra as the path disappeared into the dark. "You ever think he'd believe this?" Senna asked. "He'd believe we tried," Myra said, "and that would be enough." That night, she sat alone in her quarters, surrounded by maps of star systems yet uncharted. On the table before her lay a single item, a data crystal, old and cracked. The one Talon had given her years ago, before the war truly began. She turned it in her hands. It caught the starlight like a fragment of memory. When she activated it, it displayed a small hologram, a recording Talon had made on the eve of the first summit. His face appeared, younger, weary, but defiant. "If you're seeing this," his image said, "it means I didn't make it home. Don't mourn me. I've seen the way you look at the stars, Myra. You'll find a way to make them mean something again. The hologram flickered. Remember, hope isn't something you wait for, it's something you build. Then the recording ended. Myra sat there for a long time, the hum of the station filling the silence. Finally, she whispered, "I'm building, Talon, I promise." Years became decades. The Union spread across the stars, not as conquerors but as caretakers. Worlds long lost were reborn, new species encountered not as enemies but as equals. The legacy of humanity became one of remembrance and renewal. And far beyond the reach of any human ship, the Marek Veil continued to pulse. The lattice that had once been the architect now shimmered with hues unseen by any eye, colors that spoke to both machine and mind. Within it, countless fragments of consciousness drifted like fireflies, learning, evolving, dreaming. At its heart lingered a presence, neither human nor machine, but something in between. It remembered everything. Sometimes it reached across the gulf, whispering faintly into the minds of those who listened closely enough. Not in words, but in feelings, curiosity, compassion, defiance. The echoes of humanity carried on a voice that was once a man. On the 100th anniversary of the Reclaimer War, a ship of the Union passed near the edge of the Marek Veil. Its crew recorded a series of anomalous readings, energy spikes that seemed to correspond with human language. When analyzed, the pattern formed a single phrase: "We are still here." Back on Harvane, the city of Haven Prime had grown into a metropolis. Its towers touched the clouds, its streets shimmered with the glow of bioluminescent life. The spire of remembrance still stood at its center, taller than ever, its surface now etched with the names of every world that had joined the Union. An old woman climbed the steps leading to it, her silver hair caught by the wind. Myra Callan moved slower now, but her eyes still held the same fire that had carried her through war and peace alike. She reached the summit as the sun dipped below the horizon. The stars emerged one by one, and the spire began to hum softly, sensing her presence. She rested a hand against it. "It's been a long road." The spire pulsed, gentle and rhythmic. "I think we finally did it," she said. "We became something worth remembering." For a moment, the pattern of light shifted, an old code familiar as breath, always. Myra smiled. Good. She stood there until the stars filled the sky, the spire's light wrapping her in soft radiance. Below her, the city glowed, a living testament to everything they had built from ruin. And high above, in the endless dark, the Marek Veil shimmered once more, its light spreading slowly across the galaxy like dawn breaking after a long night. The universe was vast, indifferent, eternal, but somewhere in its endless expanse, a spark endured, human, fragile, and infinite. The stars remembered, and this time they would never forget.